that I'm currently occupying. I got another one tonight with another guy who has a bunch of famous people following him, but he doesn't have a big audience yet. So we're convened my two-way friends to talk about Iran and other stuff that's going on in the world today. Nicole, most people who watch would know probably who Richard is, since he's been on the most of everyone. I've been on Nicole's podcast. She has opinions one time, and we talked about communism, and we also have joined me here as well for the first time, Vincent Capriio, who was hoping to do a long form interview, but we'll have to do that some other time. So, what do we make of what's going on in Iran?
All right, Richard, you take the helm on that one first. What are your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me on again, David. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be on your podcast. I'm very much of the opinion that the blockade is successful. It's doing what needs to be done, choking Iran for revenue and driving the Iranian regime to the reality of how I think this is all going to end. I wonder if we have the resolve to see it to what I think should be its proper end, based on what the president is saying and the upcoming midterm elections. I also believe that this ceasefire has been a nice halftime, if you will, for the armed forces. We've almost doubled the amount of forces in the theater from when the ceasefire started to where we're at right now. And our ability to finish off the regime militarily has been enhanced. All that being said, I think we need to press a little harder. We've got our foot on their throat, and I think we need to finish what we started militarily, because I don't believe the Iranian regime is going to come to any type of meaningful negotiated settlement. There's still targets on the list, not very many, but the ability to shape what's going to happen and what I think the inevitable outcome will be is regime change. It might take a while. It might not be. We might be talking years instead of months. But militarily, if we eliminate finish off their military, and take care of their ability to generate revenue, which means continuing the blockade and or destroying their production and refining abilities for oil, I think that will shape the environment for what I hope to be inevitable, which is regime change.
Well, I just want to say, guess who's hanging out in the chat? It's our friend Kelly. So,
hey, Kelly.
Yeah, and there's another person saying, "Cold Doc, you here? I like the podcast. Thank you very much." So, yeah, I try to bring on interesting people that I know that I make in the networks I travel in, and just bring them on, because I think everyone kind of has a unique story and can share a perspective. You don't always have to go to the so-called experts, who tend to be more pundits out there than the actually knowledgeable on a subject. So, Nicole, what do you think?
I think that we have used the ceasefire to our great advantage with introducing the blockade. I think the blockade came at a time when we could actually do it successfully. We really did need to go in there and get control of the Navy and get control of their Air Force in order to create the conditions where the blockade would be successful and not put a bunch of our troops at risk. And so I think that there was a huge, people were, why didn't we do this before? Because it seems to be a real thing that is a boot on the throat of Iran. I've seen a lot of their recent social media activity have been posts. There was one directed towards Basent, and it really seems like, oh, they think that this is going to stop us. And it's like, well, if you're talking about it, it kind of feels like it's actually doing something. So I think that the blockade has been really successful. And I also am grateful that it's happening at a time where the troops aren't at risk. And they could be, which I think is a really important point to think about, is the fact that despite the ceasefire, if Iran really felt strongly that they could take us on, they would be attacking the blockade in ways that they haven't been yet. And so um, I think that shows weakness on their part. I also think it's been interesting to see the inner workings of what they're trying to develop as far as a negotiation strategy. It seems like they are supposed to be bringing a proposal in by tomorrow for a new deal for negotiations. Again, if you're stepping out willing to negotiate, trying to find some type of deal, that to me says you're in a point of weakness. The other thing that I think is interesting is that we do see a clear split in the regime. There is layers of parliament that are trying to negotiate, and then layers of IRGC that are trying to show more strength. And so, to me, those are opposing positions. And I do think that it will be interesting to see in a power structure like Iran's regime, the push and pull for the leadership position, the push and pull for the power. That is a high level of machismo exists in that kind of power structure. And I think that there is going to be a rub for leading that. The other thing that I thought was interesting as we talk about regime change is the fact that I read an article. We all know that they haven't had internet for coming on like 100 days at least. And so what we have perceived that to mean is that they're not getting communications from the outside world, and they're also not able to get communications out. But I read something today that was an interesting point to this, is that the lack of internet is causing a huge problem with unemployment within Iran. And so people are not actually able to be working. And so even the people that would have been running the oil infrastructure and all of these other energy positions and jobs that help sustain Iran's economy, they're losing their jobs. And the unemployment rate is rising to such a point where their economy is suffering not just because of the oil, but because of their own actions against their people. And so I think that creates a little bit more of a foundation for an uprising of the people, because as they suffer more and their economy begins to create bigger issues for the people of Iran, that is going to have implications on it. So I would say, keep your eyes out, because even in the Hegseth hearing, we had the hearing with the Secretary of War yesterday, and there were some people asking about, are there other tactics we can use to reach the Iranian people? In the past, we've dropped leaflets, or we've done other things when we've had disrupted communication channels to try and get messaging out, or to try and, push what our intentions are. Because it would be hard to say whether the people of Iran actually even know the blockade is happening, or if the people of Iran actually know that we are creating so much pressure on the economy. So those are my initial thoughts. I feel generally positive about where things stand.
Yeah, after a few weeks ago, when you definitely were not happy, as I remember. I'll get to Vince in a second. I just want to remind everyone, radio does still exist. It's still a technology, and I have no doubt we're sending in propaganda broadcast anyone still with an FM dial, which I would think a lot of people in Iran have. Vince, first off, because I know you guys, I didn't bother introducing you guys to the whoever's watching. Vince, why don't you start off by telling us who you are, a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am 69 years young, and I have had a 45 plus year career in public policy. I have had an undergraduate degree in accounting and MIS from Villanova University, where I attended Villanova with a fellow named Bob, who was a math major, pretty quiet guy. And I was in student government, so I used to talk to him often, and he was very introverted, and I was very extroverted. And Bob went on to become the Pope. So that's, I consider myself a pretty lucky guy in that, I went to Villanova and I met, I actually know the president of Villanova, the PhD president, and I had a really great education. And then I went to work for the IRS. I was really into public service. I was raised in a military family. My father was the Korean War DAV, and his identical brother is Colonel Daniel Caprio. So my father, I grew up on military bases and was taught to serve. So after I then had a career as an accountant, and then I utilized my accounting and MIS, they call it, background to go and work at a media company. And I worked at media companies for a number of years, running the P&Ls. And I got a chance at these media companies to run conferences. So I had the opportunity to be the event director of the MIT conferences, where I met people like Craig Ventnor, who passed away yesterday, and Mr. Immelt and Mr. Jack Welch. And as the event director, you meet, numerous people. And so I met a lot of celebrities as the guy turning on the lights and running the P&L. And I always had a background in public policy, so I eventually I was down at on 9/11. I was visiting some clients, and I was at a conference at the Marriott Marquis down at 9/11, and I walked into the building, and I saw the first plane hit the tower, and I, of course, had been trained to expect the worst. I had been trained by the FBI in disaster situations, and I was trained as an EMT by the FBI. So my father and the colonel, I called them to tell them that I was down at ground zero, and they then told me that the Pentagon had been hit. So they said, "We know that you're gonna stay because of your training," and I stayed 22 hours down at ground zero, and I saw a lot, and I then volunteered another 400 hours at ground zero looking for remains, and then I went back to my career as an event director running conferences, and I founded the Nano Business Commercialization Association in May of 2002. And we're in our 24th year, and I've spoken at over 100 colleges and universities in regard to the science of nanotechnology. And I had the opportunity also to be an advocate for the National Nanotechnology Initiative. And I had the honor of meeting President Bush in the Oval Office when we signed the National Nanotechnology Initiative. And I also speak a lot about America's crumbling infrastructure. I've testified in front of the EPA in regard to our water crisis 3 times. So I've had a very complicated, career. Some people, perceive me as, I'm a 9/11 first responder decorated by Congress. And then known as the founder of the Nano Business Commercialization Association, which is nanomaterials are chemicals. So I have worked with chemical companies and defense contractors, and it's interesting because it's I'm on a lot of webinars, and a lot of people, you've given me the time to explain my 47-year career, but a lot of people just don't like. It's interesting when I talk about public policy, I'm being attacked from the right and from the left. So the left thinks I'm a military industrial complex, and then and for whatever reason the far right thinks I'm an environmentalist, and I'm like a climate change, like, bleeding heart liberal. I'm actually I am what I am. I mean, so I appreciate being on with you. I always, David, enjoyed a lot of your opinions and commentary, and actually I've learned a lot from our other guests. I really I walk some of the same ground as the major, and I've enjoyed Nicole's perspective on these wars that we've been in, and both your guests have are telling the truth, but in today's America, it's really hard to explain the truth to Americans because they have so little background in history and foreign policy. So, I mean, for example, I've said on Mark, I've known Mark for a while, who brought us all together, and I believe that if you handed a blank map of the world and you said to an American, identify Iran, 99% of Americans could not identify Iran on a map. Mm-hmm. And like, if you've never really served the country, people that haven't served really, and we've had like 2 or 3 generations of them and 2 or 3 generations of their families, they don't really have any understanding of our enemies or the history of our enemies, and it's a difficult time in our country for people that have served the country, and to try to explain what's really going on in the world. So once again, I really have appreciated listening to you, David, and our other 2 guests.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Nicole, why don't you do a little intro, and then we'll have Richard do another intro.
My name's Nicole Rios. I have a podcast called I've Got Opinions, Nicole Rios Opinions, on YouTube. I am involved in military matters, political matters. My background is actually in health science. So I also enjoy a lot of health and family. And I have newly been thrust into the political commentary world that I am enjoying very much. I don't have as decorated of a past as Vince does, so it's hard to come up behind him. But I do really like to take a open-minded perspective. I think about things very critically and often from a very psychological point of view. And I like to war game. I like to think about where things may lead, and I put my little spin on it. So that's me.
Right.
Thanks, David, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here with Nicole and Vince. As always, Vince, thank you for your service to our nation and everything you went through on 9/11 and post 9/11. There's just amazing people that were there that day and the days that followed, serving our country. And obviously, we lost many brave souls that day, but we've also lost many brave souls who were at the World Trade Center site following the attack. They passed away from their what they incurred, and can't say enough thanks for everything you've done, Vince. Just a little background about me. I was an officer in the U.S. Air Force for a little over 10 years. I was an aircraft maintenance and munitions officer, deployed to the Middle East many times. I worked on funny aircraft, the RC-135, the U-2, the E-3 AWACS, and the A-10 Warthog. I separated in 2007 and have been in the defense contracting industry ever since. And I currently reside in Colorado, where I help small businesses get contracts with the government, with the federal government, primarily the Department of War. And this is, I believe, my third time on your podcast, David, and I really appreciate you having me on again. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah. So when the person is asking, so I'll give them a little bit of my background. My name is David March. I spent the last I'm a bit of an autodidact. I spent the last 30 years probably like self-teaching me all this stuff. I had an interest in history and intelligence, and I've written articles for various magazines on that stuff. And I've also designed 4 war games. My father taught political science in Canada for 25 years. So I had my entire life speaking to him till he passed away when I turned around 40. And yeah, that was an interesting guy to have around. And my mother taught sociology at Carleton University. So the fact that I don't have a degree is kind of weird, but I just hated school. So I went into logistics and worked in that field for like 25 years. And yeah, and now I'm about to head off on a world journey, selling my place and seeing what's out there beyond what's permitted. The 3x5 card of reality. I want to see more of it. And yeah, and you can come along for the ride, I guess. Anyone who watches this. Yeah, so the new watcher is asking about my father's book, The Myth of Parliament. So I did do a whole episode on like the secret history of Canada, which is not secret. It's just no one knows it anymore. So Vince, what do you make of what's going on in Iran?
Yeah, so this is I lived through the oil crisis of 1979. The oil crisis of 1973. 1979 and the current oil crisis. So in 1979, I was 22 years old, and I was graduating from Villanova University. So I was very much impacted, and I also at that time was in Naval ROTC. And so it's, when you talk about Iran, it's always been about the oil. And most of our people, and I've reminded people, and it comes up on some of our webinars that, the CIA and the M6 overthrew the leader of Iran in 1953. And as you know, David, you've talked about it. And the reason why they did that is that the former head of Iran, and his name escapes me, some of my friends remind me, but British Petroleum, they at that point, at the height of the Cold War, he they felt he was a communist, and he did nationalize the oil
Or Sadiq.
industry. Yeah, he nationalized the oil industry. So M6 and our CIA and the United States government, run by President Eisenhower, and he was completely aware of what we did. We went back in and installed the Shah because we didn't want the communists to nationalize the oil and gas from Iran. And so, as you know, the Shah hung on until April of 1979, and the Shah was forced out of office. And then we got ourselves the Ayatollah, who told us death to America. And if you were old enough to watch it on TV, they had millions of people in the street, death to America. And as you all know, on November 5th, 1979, the hostages were taken. So, as an American, we had the opportunity to watch that on TV every night. Iranian hostage crisis, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And as you all know, that went on until the inauguration of President Reagan in January of 1981. So I lived through the whole situation. And so most of them, think about this, somebody like me, 47 years of my life had been affected by, the goings on of Iran. So, at this point, 80% of the people there don't support the Ayatollah, our third version of the Ayatollah, and they they're pretty dug in. We go through this all the time. They're not, people that are, they're crazy. No, they're not. They're not crazy. They're what they are. They're, religious zealots that that want to, that have no use for the United States, never have. So I don't know where we're going to go with the whole thing. Our, since Vietnam and the 58,300 people on the wall, and I have some relatives on the wall. The American people have no pay. There's 67% of the Americans are against the war, because since Vietnam, the American public is against war. So the American public doesn't have much understanding of foreign policy. And so now, with the gas prices this high, they would just rather see this thing end. I mean, I don't, and I don't, there's, and we from the beginning, the Trump administration, said regime change, and they're smart enough to know that that was probably not going to happen. So now, no access to nuclear weapons, but I think eventually the president's going to have to just come on TV 9 o'clock some night in the near future and declare victory and move on, because American public doesn't, I grew up, on basis, so I'm middle class, right? So I wasn't, I still shop at Walmart, and I go down to Walmart to listen to people. And even I don't drive that much, but, every time I go to the gas station, like I was there yesterday, it's $4.29 here. Last week it was $3.97 in Connecticut. And people, if you're at the pump, are talking about it. So, I think that the president, is going to have to, well, like I said, wrap it up, and get whatever kind of victory we can get out of it. So I don't know how the 80% of those people are going to overthrow the 20% that have weapons. So, and we're not going to have ground troops to help them. So that's that whole deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you get back to the whole, if you ever read about what really happened with Mossadegh in the 50s, it's an incredible comedy of errors that Kermit Roosevelt barely pulled off. And the other thing is that people don't understand. They say Mossadegh won the election. Actually, what happened? He hadn't. He was facing a Trump 2020 situation where he had lost the election, but people had widespread. The oil companies basically spent a lot of money to legally rig the election. So what he had done was to dissolve Parliament, and basically he said he was going to have fresh elections afterwards. So imagine if Trump had tried that in 2020. That would the American people would never have stood for that. And when Mossadegh tried that in Iran, the Iranian people didn't stand for it. So it's just that's why the mullahs and the royalists conspired together with the CIA and MI6. So no one, we always get this kind of distorted history of what's actually happening.
Right, and you have to, when you talk about the American people, you have to break it down demographically. Take a look at seniors from 65 to 80. 65 to 80, the baby boomers. Well, every one of them I talk to complains about their health care and how their supplemental health care is like $300 a month, and they have to pay for all these medicines, and then their Medicare is blankety blank. And so, and if you're a senior citizen and you talk to another senior citizen, they're not talking to you about Iran. They're talking to you about their medical, their health care. That's it. So then you talk about people that just graduated from college. So say you went to college to be a nurse and you got your license. And I know this from my cousin's daughter. So she has $35,000 in debt. And hey, if she got a job for $100,000 at a hospital, the woman that cuts my hair, same thing. The daughter has debt. She just got a job for $100,000 at Yale. Okay. So if you're a younger person that's now working and you have college debt, do you think they care about Iran? No. Does the 30-year-old that's worked 60 hours a week care about Iran? No. So, it's like, who discusses Iran? Like upper middle class people, the top 20% of Americans who have the free time to discuss this subject. The other 56% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and don't have $1,000 to fix their car. And that's not coming from Vincent Capriio. That's coming from numerous think tanks on the right and left. So those 56% of those people that live paycheck to paycheck in this country, they don't care about Iran. I can continue on, and I don't need to, but I mean, that's why the President Trump has got to just some Wednesday night at 9:00, and there's no NBA game, just announce that, we've succeeded and move on. And then the price of oil can go back to 90, back to 80, and back to 70. I mean, people, people at Walmart, you go down to a Walmart, and that's America,
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, when you mention experts and politicians, I'll never forget George Herbert Walker Bush in the 1992 campaign showing how disconnected he was from Americans. They said, "Oh, President Bush, go to a supermarket to make it look like you're not an aristocrat," even though we know he was. His father was, the senator from this state and John D. Rockefeller's banker, and they were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So they had him go to the supermarket, and he's like, "Gee, Willikers, what's this?" And they said, "It's a scanner." Wow, when did those come into being? So they're so far removed from like the reality of Americans. It's like Secretary Clinton.
Mhm.
She hasn't driven a car since like the 70s. You know, her husband got elected governor, so they're driving her all around. And then she's elected president. She's never driven a car. I mean, she's never gone down to the DMV and stood in line to register your car or to register a used car, which takes like 6 hours in all these states in the Northeast. That's like normal American life, you know?
Yeah, I remember one time a friend of mine was telling me a story about how he was at the bank, and in front of him was this old guy, and they were doing stuff. He was doing his business, and then later on, he's at home. He's this guy, my friend Vincent. This Vincent was from India or Pakistan, and he was like, gets home, and he's like, his wife's like, check it out, the lieutenant governor's on TV, and it was the old guy at the bank that was in front of him.
No, and Richard and Nicole, I mean, you you see from your families, and all my cousins went to college, and all their children went to college. So I don't none of them know anything about Iran. Constantly I'm like the political nerd in the family. And so like I have a webinar, a Zoom call with my relatives, and they like ask me questions. They have no idea because they don't watch any of this. They don't like, I'm considered like the political weird nerd. And you know, I mean, they don't care. They're more concerned about the Knicks, you know, beating the Celtics in the next round, or you know, oh, isn't it really cool that King Charles came and they had, you know, long tails, you know, oh yeah, okay, you know, I mean, and then everyone I know, they either are watch MSNBC and CNN, or they watch Newsmax and Fox. There's nobody in the middle. It's crazy. It's like I'm like the only one that sees both sides. It's just it's right, Richard and Nicole. I mean, do you see that with your own families?
I think I think that my family is a little bit more plugged in. I definitely think that I'm probably one of the most interested in it all. I don't know. I understand that it might not be politically advantageous for President Trump to be taking on this fight right now for the sake of the everyday American who doesn't really understand, you know, the war or why we would do this and is feeling an economic pinch.
No, and you know, Richard, I loved your story this morning about 1982 and your grandmother. That was the exact same situation as my grandmother and grandparents. They were not racist, but you know, they had, you know, cleaning women that were black. That was like an exceptional story. It really portrayed a period of America. That was I enjoyed that. Brought me back to memory lane. If you want to tell the story again.
Yeah. You know, my grandmother, for the audience, she was a Southern Democrat and right on the border of Mason-Dixon, if you will, in Missouri, and very, very Democratic. As I said this morning, at Christmas in 1980, my mother I was 7 years old at the time. my mother told my twin brother and I not to tell my grandmother that my father voted for Reagan because that would ruin Christmas. That's the kind of Democrat that my grandmother was, and she would she grew up and lived in a small little town in Missouri, and there was two sides to the town. Quite literally, the other side of the railroad tracks was where the black people lived, and she called it Darky Town. And she had a black maid, and she would have taken great umbrage if somebody would have called her racist, because in her mind, she would never have of socialized with a black person, but in her mind, in that time period, in the 50s and 60s, 70s, early 80s, she would never have considered herself or allowed anyone to call her a racist. And I said that on the post show this morning to highlight that we've made a lot of progress, because obviously that wouldn't be the case today, and we're talking, you know, almost 50 years ago. But there's a dynamic there that I think constantly needs to be addressed about our society, and that is that progress is constant. It's not always as fast as we like, but I feel like we're always making progress. And to not acknowledge that progress on almost every issue, to not acknowledge that progress, I think is a shame. And I think we make progress on almost every issue except one. Not to open up a huge can of worms, but I'm going to. Congress. We have the worst legislative body of probably any democracy in the world. They don't do anything. What they are supposed to do, they barely can do. Congress can't pass a budget on time, and they haven't been able to do that for a long time. Which
over 30 years.
Yep, exactly, Vince.
Exactly.
And it's a great detriment to our national security. It makes everybody loves to destroy the Pentagon for not being able to pass an audit, but one of the things that makes it difficult for the Pentagon to pass an audit is that they don't have a budget. But again, I'm a very optimistic American, and I believe in the exceptionalism of America. And part of the reason I do is because of people like Vince and Nicole, who are inspirational and do amazing things, and will no doubt continue to do amazing things in the future. And I say it on the two-way platforms all the time. I believe my eyes and my ears, and I see this American exceptionalism in my daily life. And it still makes me very, very optimistic about the future of America. I think so many people, it's so easy to just dumpster dive and be negative. And I think the people that do that get so much attention on both the left and the right. And I believe that those people, they're a very small minority, but they're a very vocal minority in our nation.
And I agree with you. We've made a lot of progress in regard to, you know, social issues. I mean, and we could go over all of them, but the one area we have not made progress in is the national debt, which is the fault of Congress. It's the fault of both parties. Our national debt went over 1 trillion in 1981. When Reagan left office, it was 3 trillion. When George Herbert Bush left office, it was 4 trillion. When Clinton left office, it was 5 trillion. And then we had 9/11. I've talked about it many times. On 9/11, our national debt was 5 trillion. And then George W. Bush, because of the Mideast wars, added another 5 trillion. Congress did that. And then we had the in 2008 financial collapse. Obama came in. Congress then authorized another $5 trillion in Obama's first 3 years, and then in his last 5 years was another $5 trillion. Now we're at $20 trillion, and then we had President Trump's first term was $7 trillion, and then Congress appropriated another $9 trillion during Biden's term, and now we're at $39 trillion. So we have not made any progress in the budgets and the financial. And as you all know, this is something I just said all those numbers. You don't know how many times people have said to me, "Oh, you're reading off Google. You're reading off ChatGPT." No, I'm not. It was put to memory. I say it all the time on two-way. I don't know anything about art. I gotta tell everybody. I don't know any. I'm not a genius. I don't know anything about art. I don't know anything about that. All I do know about are all these budgets as a public policy person with 2 master's degrees. And, we're not making any progress. I mean, it's really, what our national debt's 39 trillion. The interest on the debt, as you all know, is $1 trillion. Think about that. The interest on the 39 trillion is 1 trillion. We're going to have to, in the next Congress, make some serious adjustments to Social Security, like we did in 1983. They had courage. Tip O'Neill and Senator Dole and President Reagan and that Congress had the courage to make adjustments to Social Security, which we're going to have to do again. We have to raise, right now the minimum is, the age is 67 for full benefits. I could fix it by making the minimum age for full benefits 70. That would kick the can ahead. So, but there's no discussion of that. The Democrats have no plans. The Democrats will take over the House, but they have no plans. There's no agenda. There's no public policy. They go out to the voters and say, vote for us because you hate Trump. That's their platform. And then the Republican Party has no answers to our budgets either. So I totally agree with you, Richard, and that is something that we haven't. That's the one issue that we haven't really been able to deal with. I don't know how much you think about it, Nicole, but.
Well, I mean, I think that we have to zoom out on this a little bit, because as we look at our debt, every other country has an immense amount of debt also, and we all own each other's debt, right? China owns a significant amount of our debt. They are having basically an economic crumbling right now, where their real estate market is dropping out and they have a huge unemployment issue. Japan is another person that holds a whole bunch of our debt. They're having very similar issues in Japan also with their real estate market and their long-term, solvency, essentially, because of how little their replication rate is worse than ours as far as people and their birth rates. Same with the EU. Like they're at like 125% debt to GDP. We just hit 100%. So I think that when you look at us amidst the globe and amidst some of our major partners, our debt partners, I would call them, we are all kind of in the same position. So is it terrible for us? Yes. Do we need to find a way to get out of it? Yes. but at the same time, I want to say we're in good company, but we're all fighting the same fight. And if we all own each other's debt, then it's not a bad deal for it. It's not any one of us that's going to fail without the others failing also. And so it kind of creates this backstop where it's in everybody's interest for nobody to fail. And that's why this keeps getting kicked down the road. Because if it was actually going to be a major issue, I really do feel like we would have had to do something about it. And people would have to do something about it. It's just politically inconvenient. We tried to Doge, we tried to cut the budgets, and Democrats screamed. We put, work requirements in for people that needed SNAP or benefits. And it's like 20 hours a week. Listen, you can go to school, you can be a volunteer somewhere, or you can work 20 hours a week in order to get your benefits. If you're able-bodied, that's not even for people who are disabled. Okay. Disabled people still get their bennies. It's just for the people that can work. And there was an uproar about it. And now we're looking at all this fraud that's going on in the country. And we're out here trying to do something about it. So the reality is like, listen, we can have all this debt. I would say, probably an eighth of it at least is in fraud. Okay. And once we can get some of this managed, then the interest is going to be, what we have to try and mitigate here. The problem is that we're coming up on having to refinance a significant, like 8 trillion of this debt.
Right.
And Powell wants to sit there and even if Warsh gets all the way in and has the ability to do something, he's a conservative dude. He's not going to drop interest rates for the sake of refinancing this debt. And so I really do think that, like, there are a lot of different levers to be manipulated as far as that goes. But the reality is like, all of the answers come down to the Americans that want stuff for free are still going to be mad about it. And sorry, just like you're saying, like, okay, if we have to push back the retirement age, as of right now, as far as Social Security is concerned, by 2032, the payouts are going to drop by 23%. And so we don't even have to change the age, and that's still going to be a fact. It's still going to happen. It's just on a rolling timeline right now. And so we're not getting ahead of anything by not doing anything. But every time we try to do something, people scream about all their benefits, their entitlements are getting cut. And the reality is like, America was not built to be a land of entitlements. America was built to be a land of productivity. And the only reason that we got to where we are is because we were a productive nation. And now we got a bunch of lazy losers that want everything for free and don't want to work for it. And guess what? That's how you end up in 38 trillion worth of debt.
Right.
I know I'm a young person to have this opinion, but at the same time, guess what? The economy isn't perfect. Okay, I have 3 jobs. My husband's life is contracted to the country, to the government. Like, we're out here doing what we have to do, and I'm not pissing and moaning that the country's not doing enough for me. I'm proud to be an American. We have the freedoms and the rights and the opportunities that we do to live in this country that nobody else has. And I'm not going to piss and moan about not getting paid enough, or gas being $3.50, or like you said, it's up there, it's $4 something. Listen, we had worse during Biden. And again, unless you're driving for a living, the gas price is going to cost you what? An extra $75 a month, $100 a month. Like, if we are pissing and moaning about $100 a month, then maybe you should try and get on some entitlement program, because you really do need some help. But at the end of the day, guess what? I bet you pay $100 a month in subscriptions to nonsense. I bet you pay $100 a month on Amazon purchases you don't actually need. So save it. That's how I feel about it.
No, and you're right about this. So when Medicaid was formed in the late 60s, so Medicare was signed into law by Lyndon Baines Johnson on July 31st, 1965, and Harry Truman was the first recipient because Medicare was his idea. He introduced it to Congress in 1948, and in every 2 years it failed until President Johnson, who had been the majority leader before he was vice president to Kennedy, was able to get it through Congress. So after Medicare, they decided Medicaid for the indigent, for people that had nothing. They never perceived Medicaid would be for a 30-year-old person who's got the disease of addiction either to alcohol or drugs to go on Medicaid. And that person is on Medicaid because they say they suffer from depression. So
Dude, Vince,
the
you're not
people,
lying.
I know,
I just looked
I
these
know all about
statistics
it.
up because it was blowing my mind that 30% of people on Social Security disability right now are on for depression and anxiety. And the number one cause, Vince, of depression in our country is unemployment. So you're telling me that the self-fulfilling cycle here is that you're unemployed, you get Social Security, you're unemployed, you're depressed, so you get Social Security disability for it, which prevents you from having to actually go out and get a job to support yourself. And therefore, your depression is then reinforced by the fact that you are unemployed and you sit there on the tit. It's crazy to me.
Right.
It's crazy.
And remember, the men and women, and it was mostly men, who designed this legislation in 1965 would have never in their ever thought those are the kind of people that are getting Medicaid. And that's what wrote, that's
and
why
illegal.
you, and
Like
look,
people
and,
that are the
like you go down to the American Legion Hall and say, you know, my friends that are Vietnam vets or Gulf War vets, you know, what do you think?
I'm a member of the Legion.
Yeah. So like that, I talk about, like, I could never bring my friends on two-way to talk because they're going to tell you what they really think. And you know that any veteran is adamantly opposed to illegal aliens getting medical care. I mean, they're dropping every F-bomb there ever was. And that's really, you know, that's really like the disconnect between politicians and normal, you know, Americans, because the politicians never hear like the reality. You know, they're told it in a very filtered manner, right? I mean, you know, that's what really created, you know, Trump in 15 and 16, why he got elected. I mean,
Totally.
you know, and we've gone over it many times on Mark's show. We all know on 2024, the leading issue was inflation. Right behind inflation was open borders, which is, you know, code, you know, it's illegal aliens. You know, so you have, you know, every senior citizen I ever talked to were like, you know, people, you got, you know, you meet with Senator Blumenthal, you got an award from him. How come illegal aliens get free medical care and I have to pay $300 a month for supplemental and $180 a month for Medicare? That's effed up. Well, you know, nobody talks about that on TV, you know, because it's all filtered. Because then, you know, it's like you, a few times you told the truth and I backed you up. And, you know, people are like, she's angry, she's this, she's that. No, you're just telling the truth. I mean, you know, nobody, you know, they just they don't want to hear it. You know, it's like everything's filtered and political correctness. You know that. You know.
Yeah, political correctness. I recognize that right away. Basically, it was just communism. It was just like they always, or when the French Revolution, you know, calling it. When people are going around signing ally, I'm an ally for these people. I'm like, if this were the French Revolution, you'd be all calling each other citizen. Or when the
comrade.
Comrade. Yeah. So I recognize that thief can't right away. I've been working on a theory of deviation because people operate at different levels. There's the normies who are in reality, who don't want to hear things, and then there are people that spiral out further and further deviations away from that reality into a different reality. And like at the highest level, you get people like Peter Thiel or Jeffrey Epstein. That's kind of the highest level that I've been able to pierce. I hear there's something more beyond that, but it's not neither here nor there. but sometimes I'm operating on, I try to explain things to the level of the audience that I'm addressing. Whereas our friend Kelly, she'll start going off on stuff. And I'm like, Kelly, you can't talk to these people about that. They don't know anything.
For this level of deviation out there, girl.
Yeah, you're doing the fourth level of deviation, and it's people like Professor Kenny are walking around a 1 or a 2.
And you know, the other something else that's come up, obviously, with the third assassination, is the conversation of the far left is violent and more violent than they've ever been. That is not true. During the Vietnam War and after the Vietnam War, and even during '72, during Watergate and McGovern versus Nixon, you know, we had groups like the Weather Underground, the SDS. We had groups that were bombing and killing policemen. You know,
Okay, Vince, but like, let's keep it in this century. I'm just saying, like,
it's bad now,
if
but
you look at the last 20 years, Vince, I
I
highly
agree with you. I'm just trying to tell you, the Democratic Party, the far left.
Yeah, but the
always had
Democratic
violence.
Party is not the same Democratic Party that it was in Vietnam.
Totally agree.
The Democratic
Totally
Party
agree.
today is a completely different animal. I think the other thing that needs to be said on this point is the fact that the mental illness in the Democratic Party is by twofold higher than mental illness in the Republican Party. And that is by self-reported mental illness and by party affiliation.
I'm just trying to point out, I agree with you. I'm just trying to point out to you, the far left of the Democratic Party has always been violent. This is nothing new. They've always been violent. They were killing policemen in the New York metropolitan area. Bernadette Dorton, they were throwing bombs. They were killing people in banks.
Has the far left always been so aligned with communism?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Since the British invented communism and blamed it on the Jews.
Yes, that's true. I mean, my father, the Korean War DAV, was in Walter Reed and got out of Walter Reed and then went to work for the IRS. And my father said, he went to work for the IRS in 1955. And, it was not popular to say, but the government, the State Department, was overrun by communists. And he said there were communists in the Internal Revenue Service. So, so the left, Joe McCarthy, blah, 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 blah. My father said, you got to remember, there's a little bit of, there's truth to that there was the State Department and agencies of the United States government were infiltrated by communists. It is a fact from the 50s. But nowadays, we have to hear, George Clooney making movies and Edward R. Murrow and this and that. But there was truth to that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's,
my own grandfather was a communist. The Mounties approached him to spy on the other communists and appealed to his war service. He didn't much care for that. Having fought through the Scheldt, which is some of the worst fighting in all World War II, nothing the Mounties could do to scare him.
Are we really?
You're right, Nicole. That the far left, the progressives in the Democratic Party, are. I've never seen people. There's a big difference between a liberal Democrat that's my age and a progressive. Those progressives are a very unique, and that's new to America. So,
you're going to say something, Richard?
Are we? So, one of the things I really find interesting, I'm curious what the panel's thoughts are on this, on what I'm about to say. Are we curious and or intrigued by what the phenomenon of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders and the mayor of New York City, I feel like there's a lot in common between the left and the right. Really gravitating towards these personalities, being against the establishment. I think like a Bernie bro and a true MAGA backer have a lot more in common than they don't have in common.
That's me.
Yeah,
That's
like
me.
I lived in Washington D.C. for a decade, and when Hillary was running in 2016, I was like, I don't know where everybody thinks she's so popular, because I lived in Arlington, Virginia, which is probably one of the most liberal and wealthiest counties in America. And every high-rise apartment building, every 2,200 square foot home that was built in 1937 that was worth that is worth $2 million, they all had Bernie flags and Bernie signs in their yards. Every single one. There was no groundswell of support for Hillary. So I was just curious about. I think that the MAGA bros and gals and the Bernie bros, I think they have so much in common.
Oh yeah,
And,
Well, it's
definitely.
that
and it's largely
populism, right?
ignored still by
Yeah,
the
populism.
political leadership of the country.
I remember watching Bernie Bros on my Facebook list in 2016, saying, "Well, Bernie's out. I guess I got to vote for Trump now."
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so in 2016, I lived in Connecticut, and I was born and raised in Connecticut. And I voted for Bernie in the primary because I was a registered Democrat. And then they ousted him and they put Hillary in. And I remember being so afraid. I voted for Trump in 16. That was the swing, because I voted for Trump as a protest vote for Hillary, because I saw Hillary as Secretary of State with Benghazi and everything else, and it freaked me out. And there was no way that I was going to let her be the president of the United States. And so I literally hid my vote, because I thought that I would be beat up if anybody were in my poll, like saw me voting for Trump where I lived in Connecticut when I voted.
And I mentioned that earlier today, that you can't wear a MAGA hat and walk down the street in Westport, Connecticut, or walk around Fairfield County where I live. No. I mean, so back to the commonality, the intersection of a Bernie bro and a MAGA, COVID, the vaccine. Bernie bros said, the younger people said, I'm going to have children someday. I know my daughter went to school in Burlington, Vermont. Her and her fiance, we're not getting vaccinated. They're both science people. They're like, no, I don't want to get vaccinated. Then there's MAGA people, they refuse to get vaccinated. So that's one big intersection, was the COVID vaccination. Both groups didn't want it. And what does that mean? They don't want to listen to the bureaucracy of government. They don't want to be controlled. They want to be independent. They want to make decisions on their own. They don't want to be told what to do. Right.
It's that libertarian edge, right?
Yeah,
to the populism movement.
Yeah. What is it? My parents recently called me a vaccine denier or something like that, even though I had the shot. And I'm like, Mom, Dennis, her boyfriend, I'm like, do you know how long it usually takes to develop a vaccine? And of course, they had no clue. And I'm like, 5 to 7 years. That was done in a year. We had no safety. There was no way we could do this.
Because they rammed through Congress this emergency yada yada and changed all the laws, and they came out with it after testing. They only tested 42,000 people, and they didn't even have a pregnant woman in the test. So then when pregnant women, they were told, go to talk to your gynecologist to see if you should get the shot. I mean, they had no research on it. I mean,
so for the record, mRNA technology had been in the works for a very long time, because they're trying to use it to develop cancer treatments and cancer drugs, right? And so the idea of mRNA is that the viruses or the antidote or there's a change in the DNA that's supposed to keep you from developing proliferating cancer cells, or in this case, it would have been a proliferating the virus cell. And the idea is that they use a virus to deliver this to the cell on a DNA within the DNA, and it therefore changes the DNA so that when the RNA replicates that DNA, it has the new code in it that would prevent it from furthering to replicate the cancer or furthering it to replicate the virus, right? And so what happens is that in studies up until that point, there were people dying because they were trying to do it was like CRISPR technology, and they were trying to get all of these basically life-threatening diseases they were working on as well. And the idea was that, we're going to try and, change this so we can stop this person from getting MS or whatever it was. And there were so many people that were just dying at the simple point that they were injecting the virus, like to carry it in. It wasn't getting to the point where it could help where it was changing the DNA even. It was just the fact that they were trying to alter the genetic code with a virus, and it was causing major issues in people. And this was within 5 years. So when I ever saw that coming out, that they were going to use this technology to help with the COVID vaccine, I was like, that technology isn't legitimate yet. Like it has potential. Listen, I'm not an anti-mRNA person, because in the long term, this technology, if done well, and if we can figure it out, it has some really cool practical uses. And I think that there is potential there for it to be miraculous on some levels. But what you guys are talking about as far as the timeline on how this was created with the COVID, which we couldn't even identify the virus itself. It was man-made, for crying out loud. So like, of course it's going to have weird things that it's going to mutate beyond what we could know naturally, right? Or we could predict naturally how it would mutate. You have no idea. Then you're going to put it with this other man-made technology to go alter genetics, and you're going to put that together and then put it into somebody's body and think that it's not going to have catastrophic consequences. It's like, anybody that has any level of scientific knowledge, and then to call it a vaccine as if it was going to prevent you from actually getting that, the whole thing was chaos.
And
I feel so sorry for people.
I didn't get it.
I didn't get it.
I did get shots, but I didn't get any Pfizer or Moderna. I got the AstraZeneca one in the UK. So they actually had to publish the safety data. And by the time I got it, 13 people had died and 11 of them had been women. So I felt pretty good at my odds.
And you realize that in November of 2020, when they were rolling it out for the spring, the United States government was still denying it was from a lab. Well, we're not sure if it's from the lab. And there were these vicious debates on like webinars and podcasts between the two sides, so you had the Fauci people saying, we don't have the evidence from a lab. It's from the wet market.
A wet market. Vince, I took a college epidemiology course in 2024. A college epidemiology course, and they were still trying to say it wasn't from a lab. They were in my college course. They were teaching us that it was from a wet market, and that it was based on a bat virus that had mutated, which it was. It was originally from a bat virus that had mutated, but it was intentionally mutated in a lab based on the bat.
Yeah, the idea that it was so offensive. I mean, if somebody dies from an anthrax poisoning in Aberdeen, Maryland, or somewhere near Dugway, Utah, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what the heck is going on at Aberdeen Proving Grounds and Dugway Proving Grounds. Yeah. And the research they do is like, and the person who died actually worked at that installation. You can connect the dots. the coordinated defense that was displayed after the virus, became a thing. Unfortunately, it really fuels a lot of the problem with conspiracy theories is some of them are true.
Yeah, that's why conspiracy is a crime, Andre.
Yeah, and people propagate some of them are true, and that's what fuels that whole world. And I mean, I didn't know anybody in my space, in the national security space, in 2020 that poo-pooed on the idea that gain of function research might be going on in China, and that it might have originated in the lab. It would have been laughable if you would have dismissed it in most educated conversations, and that the administration rejected it so quickly. And then you got tarred and feathered publicly if you even entertained the idea. It was all just so loud.
You were racist. You were
Oh,
racist.
exactly.
Yeah, you're racist.
Right.
For having a brain and thinking
Yeah.
critically about what might be possible.
Yep, it just idiotic.
And
Strange time to be alive. I wonder what people 100 years looking back at this are going to be like, what happened to drive them all insane at the same time?
What was everyone's moment? So where you realize, like, okay, this is ridiculous.
Oh,
So-
for me, it was the California doctors. So there are these two Californian doctors. So this is very early on. I was like, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think society will go along with it for more than a few months. But maybe we should take 2 weeks just to be sure. And then I was about a month in or two. We had these Californian doctors who were just doing a press conference on YouTube with reporters telling what was going on at their hospital, at their clinic, and they started pulling it down from every website. Like, people were uploading it, and I watched it a couple of times, but I'm like, okay, something's wrong here.
Yeah, so I'm really ashamed because my twin brother, he was calling BS from day one on COVID. For me, I lived in Arlington, Virginia when it started.
oh God.
And so yeah. So I lived in a high-rise building, and I had a view of one of the many very nice public parks in Arlington County. And I was drinking coffee on my deck one morning, and I saw county grounds crew personnel. They were unscrewing the rims from the basketball court. They were taking away the nets from the tennis court and the soccer fields. And I'm like, how in the world can being outside possibly be bad for an individual? And so several weeks go by and everybody's just doing their own thing. Everything's shut down. And a friend of mine, he texted me and he's like, I am sick and tired of being locked up. He's like, I'm coming over. We're gonna watch an old baseball game because we were both big Washington National fans, still are. And so we were gonna watch one of the World Series games because they'd won the World Series in 2019, and have a few drinks. And I'm like, yeah, sure, because I was kind of sick of it too. And restrictions were let up, and then we got to the point. It's like, okay. So a bunch of my friends and I, we went to a neighborhood bar, a sports bar. And I don't know, this was probably like 5 or 6 weeks after it all started. And a place we frequented, we would watch NFL games there on Sunday, and just a great little local neighborhood establishment. And I got up to use the restroom because the bar was closed. You could order drinks, but you couldn't go sit at the bar. You could you could sit at high top tables, but you could not sit at the bar. But the bartender would walk around the bar to take your order, go back to the bar, pour your drinks, and bring them to you. But I got up to use the restroom, and one of the managers of this place, an individual who I had known for 8 years at that point, he was like, "Rich, you got to have your mask on." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I use the restroom. I'm coming back, and there's some people I know at a different table than I'm sitting at, and I start talking to them. This manager comes up to me again. He's like, "You can't talk to other people. You have to go back to your table." I'm like,
Right.
he's like, if you don't comply, I got to throw you out. I'm like, are you serious? It's like 4:30 on a Saturday. Like, we're just eating chicken wings and having beers. And I'm like, I have friends sitting at a different table, and you're telling me I can't talk to them because of COVID, and I don't have to wear a mask at my table, but I have to wear a mask to go to the restroom. And while I'm going to the restroom, I cannot stop and talk to anybody. Like, this makes no sense at all. And that was my moment.
In Connecticut, you couldn't go to church, but you could go to the casino.
Oh, God.
Yep.
There you go, Vince.
I was
There
in
you go.
Connecticut for COVID. Vince, I lived in Brookfield for COVID. And my moment was when they told us we had to wash our groceries. When we came home from the grocery store, we had to wash all our groceries because it could have COVID on it. That was my
And
there's not a
lived in
chance in the
Brookfield.
world.
So
Yeah.
Did you used to go to the Costco there?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I probably ran into you years ago. So I started getting my groceries from Costco, and they would come in a box. We were told to wash the top of the box off. Remember the car?
Yep.
So all my groceries, like $150 worth of groceries, came from Costco. They would deliver them and put them on my front doorstep, and then we were told never to talk to the driver, and then we were
Yep.
told to spray down the
Contactless
cardboard.
delivery.
I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, we never.
And that we were only
That was
allowed
never
to send
official
one
government policy.
one person per household to the store.
Yeah. That was never. People complain about Canada a lot, and it's just like it's more because it went on for so long. And I actually talked to a cabinet minister friend of mine at an event when the restrictions were coming down because they were doing the, you can carry around your proof of vaccination laws. And I was telling him something, and he said to me, "David, we don't want to be doing any of this. We hate all this. The entire, like, from the premier on down, but it's all polling at 50%. So that's why we're doing all these restrictions. If we could end this tomorrow, we would." And as soon as the trucker convoy went off, every provincial government in the country used that as an excuse to end their lockdowns.
That was sad. I
Yeah.
mean, from an American point of view, like watching that happen, it just, I don't know. When I think about like liberty and, I felt like in a lot of ways we had lost a lot of our rights. It was like we ended up getting transferred to Florida in 2021. So I had to exist in a very liberal state. We basically lost our business. We were running a gym at the time that basically got shut down for 12 weeks. We tried to keep things going through the process, but then at the end of the 12 weeks, our landlord basically kicked us out. We were still paying and everything, but we were on a month-to-month point in our lease. And he kicked us out because, listen to this, the rental car market at that time it increased so much because of all the impacts on shipping and everything, that rental cars went through the roof. And the style of gym that we had was like a CrossFit gym. So you could have it in basically an old service center kind of style 3-bay. So we had like a 3-bay garage type setup, and they brought in a used car lot. So they kicked us out so they could bring in a used car sales place to run out of there because used cars were doing so well. And so it was just a crazy time. And we came to Florida and they didn't have masking. They didn't have 6 foot. I felt like a criminal walking into a store without a mask on. Like I felt very like, oh my God. My husband's like, it's fine. Like he was never into Connecticut. I can tell you that. But it was just like, woo, we're night and day.
That's a great point because when I left DC, Northern Virginia, in the summer of 2020, and moved out west, and I was visiting my parents in Iowa, and I grew up in Western Iowa, a little town called Council Bluffs, and my mom and I went to lunch and went shopping and went to lunch in Omaha, and I could not believe we walked into this restaurant and she just walked right up to the bar. We sat at the bar and had lunch, and nobody was wearing a mask. And this is like August of 2020. I could not believe it. I was shocked. And like physically, Nicole, I was like, wait, whoa, I can't step forward. Like somebody's there's
Right.
got to be a COVID cop somewhere that's going to stop me from whatever I'm about to do here. Like, and they hand you a laminated menu, and they didn't like spray it first and wipe it down. Couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Well, this has been wonderful. I have a hard stop at 4. I want to thank everybody. Thank you, David, for inviting me. And
Thanks for coming on.
It's wonderful to get to know you better, Nicole. And once again, thank you, Richard, for your service to our country and all your kind thoughts in regard to my health issues. So thank you. Thanks again.
Vince. It's a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks.
Vince.
Bye, Vince.
Bye now.
Okay, so yeah, more COVID talk.
Well, I was going to say that certainly went wide of Iran, but
yeah, I know. That's how conversations work.
Yeah, I like it. It's fun.
Yeah, it's Vince is a treasure. What a great guy.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're comfortable, you can string till 4:30, and then we can have a bit of a break for two-way.
Well, I think that Mark is live today, right? He started like a half hour ago, I think.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
He did. Yeah.
And then he's gonna repost it later. But I think that he was trying to I think his child had a talent show tonight, so he was going a little early.
No problem.
But I'm good for whatever. I think that I've seen a couple of interesting things about just happening in the news at the moment about Iran bringing a proposal that was like immediately dismissed, and Galibaf is popping off on X, talking a lot about the blockade. And again, to me, I think the more they're spending time on acting like the blockade isn't hurting, the more it's hurting. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
well, I definitely think the blockade is having an impact. Anybody that is denied a source of revenue, particularly their only source of revenue, that certainly has an impact. The satellite pictures don't lie about Iranian ships and what's going on. And again, it's very effective. We talk in the air power space about parallel warfare and centers of gravity. Not to get too into catch terms, but those are things we use. So, for example, if you have a surface-to-air missile site and there's one radar and there's 4 batteries of actual missiles, the missiles are useless without the radar. So just take the radar out and worry about the missiles later in the beginning of a conflict. So you can attack a lot of things at one time. If the goal is to deny Iran revenue from oil, well, yeah, you could blow up Karg Island. You could invade Karg Island. You could take out production facilities, or you could just do the blockade. The center of gravity is to deny them revenue. And moving forward, it's a lot easier if you do get regime change at some point to actually have the production and refining facilities still in place. So the blockade accomplishes the center of gravity effect, which is to deny them revenue.
Yeah, so Yeah, basically my read on it, and I just keep bringing it up in our two-way tonight groups. Basically, the idea, the whole problem with this is that we've allowed. They say Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, for its entire existence, has closed the Strait of Hormuz, and now we're taking them out because we're tired of their 47 years of BS. Of basically, and I call them the financialists. Some people call them the City of London conspiracy, but basically, it's all about creating difficult, placing short bets down, making because there's going to be a war in advance. You put your short bet down on oil, and you start a war with Iran or Israel, and you just watch it. That money, you make your bet, and because you have that advanced knowledge, because you have all the intelligence agencies at your service, so you know who's going to make the problem, and you're going to profit from the problem. And we're just Trump is taking out one of those. He has been spent his first year and a half going around the world, taking out all these problems and making peace out of them. And in the long run, that will be better for the American people than just to kick the can down the road, like the financial debt and other things that everyone's been doing since, I don't know, World War II.
I think that, Vince made a good point about it not being politically convenient and having it cost, everyday Americans. I think what's interesting here to me is that it's costing us way less than it's costing anybody in Europe, especially as it relates to, their energy and their energy issues. I mean, we're over here pumping out more oil than we have in a long time. We're deregulating. We've got, we're starting to pump off of California now where we weren't before. And, we're actually not in as bad as a position as other people are. And so like when we look to places like Australia, even, and like I said, parts of Europe, like they're really struggling with energy. And my question is, at the end of the day, you really wanted Iran in control of that much of your energy to the point where all they would have to do is just do a little pirating in the Strait of Hormuz and you'd still be in this position? Like, what if they got to the like just thought project for a second. If they got to the point where they did have enough ballistic missiles that they could completely protect their nuclear program, right? Which I really do believe was one of the main reasons we got into this conflict. Okay. And now they have this huge ballistic umbrella over a nuclear program. They're quickly developing and increasing their enrichment. Okay. And now they want to hijack the world, and they feel like they have the nuclear power to back it up, and they have the ballistic power to protect the nuclear power that they're using to back it up. Why wouldn't they just run the strait anyway? Like, I don't see this not having happened in 6-12 more months anyway, right? Because then they still have Europe on a chokehold as far as energy is concerned. And Europe has done nothing to help themselves as far as energy is concerned. So like, why wouldn't they? Like, I just don't see, like, if we hadn't have stopped them and they continued to develop the ballistics and continued to develop the nuclear, do you guys think that they would have just sat on it? Or do you think they would have used it for leverage in some way to gain more power, more global power?
Oh yeah,
I don't think
what like the North Koreans do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what has taken place over the last 3 years, really since 2024, the first time that I remember my thought process when Iran engaged. I believe it was maybe April or May of 2024 when they launched their first large-scale missile attack against Israel. And the United States and Israel, Jordan defended Israel. That it was a drone attack, and then Iran started with some attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, and the idea of kinetic pure kinetic action against Iran, it was somewhat shocking to me, because they were just always, yeah, we had some dust ups in the 1980s, but it was shocking to me. I was further shocked, not shocked, but surprised is a better word. Last year, when Israel, the 12-day war, when Israel was just flying over Tehran and large portions of Iran with relative ease. And so now we're at a point, Iran's ability, you can make a good argument that the ballistic missiles are more of a threat than the nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
If you're Europe or America, because getting even a dirty weapon into Europe or America, fortunately, it's a very difficult task. Especially when you have Mossad tracking your movements.
Yeah.
So again, I'm perplexed at Europe and their stance between Iranian energy and Russian energy, and how they just don't understand or get the damn problem of relying on these horrible state actors that are nothing but a problem for the civilized Western world to deal with. And that's why I kind of laugh at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because I wish Russia wouldn't have invaded. I look at Russia as 1A and Ukraine's 1B for the calamity formerly known as the Soviet Union. But the fact that the Russian energy is still purchased by Europe, and that they rely on it such large extents of Europe, it's hard for me to take the conflict seriously, except for the loss of life, which is a tragedy. But if you were really scared of Russia, well, you sure as hell wouldn't be buying their oil. Like, let's just call a spade, right?
Yeah. And if it's also this leverage piece, right? It's like, okay, so you're letting Russia have that much leverage over you, and then claiming, like, moral high ground on supporting Ukraine. Like, it's just so, like, it's stupid. It's not logical, other than the fact that they're asked out. Otherwise, you know what I mean? Unless they come to us and they're like, again, on their high horse, what they believe is a moral high ground, that they would never bow to us in that way. But yet here we are. They've made major deals with us as far as LNG is concerned in the last 6 weeks. And so it's like, okay, you guys can talk whatever political nonsense you want on the cover to save face with your constituents or whatever. But the reality of the situation is, you guys know you backed yourself into a corner. And,
I mean, the UK could solve all of Europe's energy needs. They're sitting on a giant pile of shale oil because of all those coal deposits they have there. And they have the North Sea that they could drill, and their parliament decided not to access it. They could have oil up again and running in 3 months by bringing in some of the stuff. But they have, some say it's suicidal empathy, some call it like there is this idea that they can reduce. They didn't like the fact that we got up to being 7 to 8 billion people, and they are trying to get us back down to a more manageable size. They're not going to win, but a lot of people are going to die.
But also, like, you need energy. You need energy anyway. You know what I mean? There's nothing that, like, reducing your population and developing some, source of energy are not mutually exclusive. You know what I mean? I don't know. That, again, it's not logical to me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a crazy thing to say, but the French have it figured out. I mean, it's a significant percentage of their energy comes from nuclear, and they never bought into the silliness that the Germans did. I mean, the Germans dumped all their nuclear energy, or most of it, and it's asinine. I've said it before on David's podcast. I've said it on other shows about our allies and our relationship with our allies, as well as NATO, that it's a healthy thing for the United States to stress test its allies. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm a proponent of it, and I believe that President Trump, essentially, that's what he's done, whether intentionally or just through our actions. I think a wonderful byproduct of our war with Iran is the stress test we've placed on Europe and NATO. And what's always baffled me, I'm curious both of your thoughts, is one thing that's very true in ballistic missile technology is that the more advanced you get with it, the further the missile goes. And Europe's first. So the lack of concern that many European nations have shown with Iran's technology and their pursuit of nuclear weapons, the lack of concern with so much of Europe is baffling and concerning to me.
I feel like they'd rather have their head in the sand than have to do anything. I think they're up against some of the same political constraints as far as their constituencies, that we are in just different ways. And I don't know if they think it's as much as a threat as we do. I mean, Israel certainly thinks they are. And I would have thought that them trying to fire missiles on Diego Garcia would have opened their eyes a little bit to the potential impact, or at least semi-threat. But what are they going to do, Richard? That's the thing. What are they going to do about it? You know what I mean?
I'm surprised they didn't lose their collective, you know what, when they fired missiles at Turkey.
Well,
NATO dismissed that pretty much.
I can't remember Turkey asked for missile air defense from one of the other countries, and they've refused. And I don't think it was Greece. I know they would never bother to ask Greece because they invaded it. But
right, but Greece was Cyprus was attacked. Akrotiri was attacked with drones, and again, I mean, I don't recall any conversation about Article 5 or coming to the aid of these NATO allies. I don't know what it would take if they shot a ballistic missile at Paris or London. Maybe that would get NATO's attention. But I think a long lesson from this conflict is going to be. I'm not optimistic this will happen, but I wish it would. A conversation about the role of NATO, how it's operated, how it's funded. The idea that it's criminal to me that questioning the purpose of NATO somehow makes you not a smart person when it comes to national security matters. I'm not saying NATO should go away, but when the Soviet Union went away, the Warsaw Pact went away, it would have been a logical course of action to at least have a conversation about, okay, so what are we doing here? What are we spending all this money on? Because in the United States, we did have that conversation. We had a tremendous consolidation of defense contracting companies. Northrop and Grumman used to be two different companies. Lockheed and Martin were two different companies. McDonnell Douglas and Boeing didn't even keep the name. They just took over McDonnell Douglas and dumped the name. So we had that conversation from a business military industrial complex perspective, but we didn't have it with our partners. And somehow the amount of money we spend on it and the nations we've let in, again, I would make the argument that NATO's purpose, how many Americans would be in favor of defending one of the former Baltic states of the Soviet Union? Like, Are we going to send 250,000 Americans to defend Lithuania? Because that's what we're required to do.
Yeah. I
And
remember people asking that question when Montenegro joined, and Tucker's like, "What? We're going to send 250,000 troops to defend Montenegro? What's
yeah,
this all about?"
exactly. And that's, I don't think that is an unreasonable discussion to have. Again, when we let Finland in, I mean, I don't have the exact numbers, but we basically somewhere around 40% of the border of NATO, we increased it by getting Finland in, that we have to defend against Russia. And I think the Senate spent less than, I think they were done by lunch voting on letting Finland into NATO. I mean, we didn't take it very seriously. And yet if something happens, again,
The
we're on
big
the hook for it.
cash. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the whole point of expanding NATO is to get, because some people actually are dumb enough to think that they can win a nuclear war. They want to put missiles like cut. Basically, right now, Putin has maybe 30 minutes to make a decision, much like in that movie that came out a few months ago, where they talked about that. And the president has 30, maybe 30 minutes if he's lucky to make a decision. Well, in the 1990s, well, first off, if they bring those missiles much closer to Russia, so Putin will automate. So we just create Skynet because he won't have the time to make a decision. He'll have to just make the missiles on automatic. So be rely on Russian radars and satellites for good. And we nearly had a nuclear war in the 90s under Yeltsin because they mistook I think it was Norway that had launched a missile, and they thought it might be a first strike. So you really
Oops.
want to put the hand of the fate of the world in the hands of a Russian computer?
Right.
Yeah, I just think in the movie you were referring to, I believe it was House of Dynamite was the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
And it
With
was
such a disappointing ending.
so disappointing. I was like, that's it.
It was
Like, this
so
is-
good. And then it was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
kind of got the ending, but I could see why people were disappointed. You didn't tell us if the bomb went off or not, right?
Come
Like,
on.
Yeah, I
but it
enjoyed
does indicate it now. It has happened. That's what I took from that ending.
yeah, and to your point about nuclear war, David, I mean that was Ronald Reagan's whole thing.
Mhm.
I mean that's how the Cold War came to an end, because I mean essentially Reagan did not believe in mutually assured destruction. He thought it was a ludicrous concept, and he was right in many ways. But again, I think America, we've really tested our allies. I think our relationships with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Singapore, Australia are stronger than they are our relationships with Europe. I think more so than ever, what's going on domestically with European nations and their immigration problem, which I think has a huge impact on how they act internationally, with their issues with Muslim immigration. Those are real things, and I go back to again, a lot of people laughed at the current administration's national security strategy, but it was very concise, and it was certainly not wonky as those documents usually are. But what's being played out, you got the playbook already. They sent it out, and now I look at what's going on with our European allies and what Vice President Vance said last year. I believe it was, I can't remember if it was a NATO summit or if it was an
I think
EU
it was
meeting.
in Munich.
Yeah, it was in Munich. And I mean, what he said was very, very telling about, listen, you need to get your house in order if you want us to continue being the guard dog in the neighborhood. And I don't believe that Europe has got the message yet.
Yeah, a friend of mine, he has a much bigger following, but he has basically he says it's like it's a wild dog, and they've never had been have been disciplined. So basically, America's putting its hand on top of the dog on its stomach until the dog stops wriggling. Because when you look at these European Union leaders like Kaja Kallas, it's so obvious that no one has ever told them no. They just used to steamrolling over everyone.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And I'll be going there soon, so that'll be interesting. Want to be witness to insanity, I guess. But
well, it's always better to get your own perspective of things than just to, be told what is, you know what I mean? So maybe you'll find a different perspective. Maybe it won't be what we're told it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have maybe 10 minutes left before the end of the show. Anything else? Any final thoughts?
What is next in Iran?
Yeah, you guys think we pop off again, or you think the ceasefire ends it?
Yeah, I'm starting to think the ceasefire is ending it. Like they haven't really been able to fire anything off. Iran has. They just don't even know who's in charge there, and that's why it's been difficult. I think Trump keeps getting an extension on the deadline because they're just trying to find someone who can make a deal with. I think the Israelis kind of screwed the operations plan because they were operating on their own agenda, which was to cause chaos and not to get a negotiated ending. So when they blew up all the leaders, they're like, Trump, I think, was like, "What? Why did you do that? You're trying to talk to those people."
It's the same thing that happened when we were trying to negotiate the 20-point plan in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They blew up our negotiators.
Yeah.
I mean, it's depending on who you're talking to. I just think that it is hard to wage a war where you're not the only one when you are fighting with an ally that may or may not have different intentions or desired outcomes as you. Mm-hmm. And especially when you are having to share intel. That's a hard line to dance because it's not like we're playing from the same side, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're on the exact same team.
Right.
And that can just create complications. Yeah. And I also think that there isn't a lot of, I don't know what level of force would actually get Iran to the table. And then even if they were at the table to negotiate, are we going to believe them? Are we buying what they're selling? I think those are the two main questions I have, I don't see total regime change as far as like IRGC being completely, taken out and some level of like purely democratic, government getting stood up. I don't see that happening in short order. But I don't know. I think I'm probably 50-50 on whether we drop more bombs. I think it depends. I think we end up staying with the blockade and, managing the strait on some level. And, oh man. And then I guess at some point you see who shakes out, right? You see who like starts to rise up into a leadership position and start running things again. And then you make an assessment based on that. Like maybe it is, what's not happening is people aren't dying. And as a woman, as an American, I don't want our soldiers out there at risk and dying. I'm sure that I wonder, maybe Richard, you could just speak to this quickly, is like, how long can we maintain the ships that are over there doing the blockade? And like, at what point does, the Ford actually need to get back for, repairs? And, like, do we have the ability to keep churning ships out over there in order to maintain what we've got going on? What does that look like?
So, Admiral Paparo, he's the commander of Indo-PACOM Command, Pacific Command, formerly known PACOM, and he testified a week ago for the House and the Senate, and basically said, I'm reading the quote here, "I don't have enough amphibious ships. We don't have enough surface destroyers. We certainly don't have enough attack submarines, and our trajectory is on the wrong side, which is why we need to win in Iran, because we can't keep all these assets focused on Iran in the Middle East and also counter China
everywhere
in the Pacific."
else.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, when we fought the Gulf War, we had 6 carrier battle groups in the Middle East. We have, depending on whether you want to count Nimitz, but carrier strike groups, and we can't deploy 5 or 6 of them at one time. It's impossible. So having 3 in the Middle East is quite an achievement right now. The Air Force, the weapons, there's plenty of weapons. Anybody who says we're short of weapons, that conversation is kind of fraudulent unless you're talking about a specific type of weapon. There are certainly some standoff weapons that we've depleted. There's some air defense weapons that we've depleted. Again, that's information that's classified that I certainly don't have access to, and I doubt anyone who's talking about it has access to.
Or they wouldn't be talking about it.
Or they wouldn't be talking about it. Yeah. What I can tell you, something we have plenty of are joint direct attack munitions. And if we do go back into any type of air battle over Iran, the Iranians have not rebuilt their air defense system in the past 3 weeks. So our aircraft will still have relative air superiority throughout the battle space, and will use those munitions, those direct attack munitions. That being said, the Ford's got to come home. The Theodore Roosevelt's is ramping up. It's on its Comp 2X right now off of California. Comp 2X is composite training unit exercise. That's how carrier strike groups, they get certified before they deploy. So Teddy Roosevelt should be probably getting ready to deploy by, sometime in June, I would imagine, at the latest. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard on the forces. It's hard on everybody to sustain these operations. I don't think we're going to go back to combat operations over Iran. I think we should. I just don't think that the president's going to do that. And I don't know what that means for the future of the country. But as some people have said, maybe we just keep mowing the lawn. And that's not, in my opinion, militarily, that's not an ideal solution. And by mowing the lawn, I mean that to David's viewers, you bomb, they rebuild some stuff and you bomb it again, and you just keep mowing the lawn. It's going to grow back a little bit, and you have to mow the lawn and take it out. I don't think that's an ideal solution, but I believe it's an option, a course of action that's being entertained. So again, I wonder how much we talked with the Israelis before we started this, as far as going down the path of negotiating with the Iranians, because I don't feel like the Israelis were ever on board with negotiating. And if negotiating was a viable option at some point, you have to be a little careful about who you kill in leadership. You got to have somebody to negotiate with. And it's very clear to me that the Iranians are all over the place from a leadership perspective. I don't think anyone can really definitively say who the hell is calling the shots in Iran right now.
Yep. I look at it kind of like I think Pakistan's going to be the key player here and getting guarantees out of them. They do have a lot of influence inside of Iran. They were effectively telling Israel that if you nuke Iran, will nuke you. They put them under Iran under their nuclear umbrella. And I think that's going to be I think Pakistan will be using this to their advantage to gain influence in the region, which is good. When certain people are running Pakistan, what looks like the current guys are the good ones, and they're just going to. I think I see them having a way of basically using for lack of a better term, peacekeeping forces to monitor and make sure that Iran doesn't develop this capability in the future. That's kind of my take. There are other parties in the region who want to also have a stable Iran that's not run by nut jobs. Okay, well, I think that's been a good 2-hour show. So I'm going to cut the feed here. And if you like this kind of stuff, like, share, subscribe. Bye-bye.
Thanks, David.